Quote, "Mathematics is the only language shared by all human beings regardless of culture, religion, or gender. Pi is still approximately 3.14159 regardless of what country you are in. Adding up the cost of a basket full of groceries involves the same math process regardless of whether the total is expressed in dollars, rubles, or yen. With this universal language, all of us, no matter what our unit of exchange, are likely to arrive at math results the same way." End quote. Hey there, this is Jonathan, and you're listening to The Equation, a biologist's inquiry into love, spirituality, and social justice. And in today's episode, we're going to look at the namesake, the equation. Finally! I found the introductory quote at www.learner.org on their interactive page for math and daily life. I thought it was pretty cool that the effect love can have on our consciousness was expressed through me with an equation, since both math and love are considered universals. And this is coming from a fellow who is terribly critical of the notion of universal truths. With that said, the equation that I'm about to explain to you is non-algebraic in that it's not a true solvable equation, but a means in which to explain a phenomenon in a way that makes sense to me. My high-level shit experience represented a huge shift for me in numerous ways. One being that this freedom that I so cherished and strove for was actually of the emotional variety. That emotional freedom is the ultimate form of freedom, and in order to gain that freedom, one had to overcome their fears. What is emotional freedom? For me, it's complete freedom to be you, to live in a tranquil state of self-expression, to live without insecurities, something I still struggle with to this day, to live in complete confidence of yourself and your abilities, to live freed from shame and embarrassment. Sound good? Another shift occurred in the area of my understanding of what it means to be a human. Yes, we're these amazing mammals that eat, sleep, and have sex. We are also so much more. We can overcome our biological tendencies towards oppression, and the means in which to accomplish this is through love. That love is the key to the great mystery of existence. It's the grand purpose. Put quite simply, we exist to love. That yes, our purpose is to survive. But the best survival strategy we have at our disposal is love. And that this is huge because many people have asked that we love. But I argue that it just makes sense to do so. That no one, not even the people doing the oppressing, win. That the only way everyone wins and benefits is from the expressive energy of love. Before I go any further, I would like to define love in the ways that I am using them in this project. The first definition is looking at love as an energetic force. It is this force that has the ability to dissolve our fears and enable us to live our lives in the type of love that has been defined by M. Scott Peck as, quote, "the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth," end quote. I would like to note that I came across this definition while reading Bell Hook's amazing work, All About Love, New Visions. I cannot recommend this book enough. The following equation helps illustrate what emotional freedom looks like on a fundamental biological level. Now, before I go any further, let me just say that I can't think of a much worse radio material than trying to explain an equation over the air. So if you go to the website, theequation.info, I have everything written out to help aid you in your understanding. There are two parts to the equation, the alpha part and the beta part. Let's first look at the alpha part as it's the dominant aspect of the equation. The alpha part consists of the alpha ego plus confidence. For the purposes of this biological explanation, confidence is equal to negative fear, and the ego, the part of our consciousness that perceives our bodies as a separate self, fears loss of control of our emotions. The ego therefore oppresses our emotions by imposing its will on them through fear, the most effective tool of alpha energy. So, for example, say we're out and about in the world and we see a duck waddling around all goofy-like, and we have an initial response to laugh. But we're the only ones to see it, and it would seem odd to laugh at this situation, so we repress it. That's our alpha ego taking control of the situation, imposing its will on our emotions. On the beta side of the equation lies our emotions, as well as our fears. Our alpha consciousness has a tendency to dominate our beta consciousness through oppressive fear. Through love, in this case I'm talking about love as an energetic force, we can simultaneously dissolve our alpha ego and our beta fear to exist in a state of egoless confidence, what Buddhists have called for thousands of years enlightenment. Emotional freedom is obtained when we can dissolve our alpha ego, the biological origin of oppression. When this occurs, a kind of balance is achieved in our being. When we are out of balance, we tend to become skewed towards either more of an alpha side of consciousness or the beta side, depending on our personalities and situation. There are a couple of key concepts I would like to point out about this equation. One is that the whole shebang runs off fear. I think to most listeners it may be obvious to conceptualize the beta side of fear, since most stories depicting hierarchical animal relationships portray a dominant alpha keeping the pack, herd, wife, etc. in line through some form of aggression. But one of the key components to understanding these relationships is that this alpha aggression is also fueled by fear, the fear of loss of control, either of our own emotions, the pack, the person, whatever the situation. Therefore, the alpha imposes its will on whatever object it fears, in order to oppress it so it can maintain its dominance. In this equation, confidence is the opposite of fear, but ego-driven confidence is fueled by fear, and therefore it is as fragile as a long-stemmed wine glass. Guess who has two thumbs and prefers their wine in a stemless chalice? Anyway. The only way to break this oppressive cycle of fear is through love. Love brings about the sensation of egoless confidence. And it is quite the incredible sensation indeed. There is literally nothing else like it. Another point I would like to hit on is the construct of gender. It's easy to think about this equation in terms of gendered relationships, especially since we live in a patriarchal society that magnifies perceived differences in respect to our bodies. And although our consciousness is most definitely informed by our perceived gender roles, it goes beyond that. Male-bodied individuals can consistently express a more beta consciousness, while a female-bodied person can just as easily express a more alpha consciousness. And even though I'm a product of a culture that pathologizes any type of body form that exists outside of a binary gender norm, acknowledging the many beautiful people that fall outside of this construct is a means of accepting and embracing the beautiful diversity nature has given us to commune with. I will dive into the subject of gender much more in depth in future episodes that look at cultural influences on obtaining emotional freedom. Now let me give you a couple of examples of what these different expressions of consciousness look like in the real world. A person that exhibits a more alpha personality will give off the air of confidence, and this confidence is often gained at the expense of inducing fear in others. For example, when someone belittles someone else or makes fun of someone, they are enforcing their alpha confidence by instilling fear in others. One of the best examples I can give that I think people can relate to is what I call the alpha belittlement laugh. This is when someone laughs, not because that person has been genuinely moved by joy to laugh, but out of fear of loss of control of the person the laugh is directed towards. Say a person has an idea that they express to someone, and the response is a quick, demeaning laugh. This is due to the alpha feeling threatened, and therefore they try to gain leverage, or power of the situation by attempting to oppress the person who shared their idea. As for the more beta personalities, they tend to lack confidence in a range of areas, and their consciousness and their fear can be debilitating. Often someone that expresses a more beta personality will not do anything to attract the attention towards themselves. They will play it safe in social situations out of fear of drawing negative attention from more alpha-leaning individuals. The beautiful part about this phenomenon is that there are alternative ways in which to gain confidence that don't include instilling fear and extracting confidence in others. It can be gained by showing kindness to another critter, by mastering a skill, by healing oneself, just to name a few. Gaining confidence in this way is how we evolve as a species. But again, I want to clarify something. This idea isn't new in a lot of New Age circles. But what can be dangerous is believing the notion that a certain group of people are the only ones that are evolving. This can lead to a ton of problematic logic about different groups of people. That's why I feel like it's important to combine this spiritual understanding with a humanistic understanding of people. This allows us to view everyone as being in the same boat with different rules. For example, as someone who identifies as a heterosexual, it is much easier to let my light shine through than if I identified as gay. This is a form of privilege, and I'll dive deeper into the phenomenon of privilege in a later podcast. Hopefully, I have been able to convey this idea so that you can see the fluidity inherent in the nature of our consciousness. We are always in relation to one another, and sometimes people exhibit more of their alpha consciousness, while other times the beta consciousness is expressed. Both of these conditions have an underlying fuel stoking the ever-shifting fires of self-doubt, insecurity, pain, shame, and self-consciousness. You know, all the nasty stuff that weighs us down. I also want to express that I certainly don't think this rather simple framework covers absolutely everything about human consciousness. Not even close. But that doesn't mean I think that it's garbage. It's a useful fiction that can be a tool for understanding how people gain and lose energy. Alpha fearlessness is an attractive trait. I'm sure most of you listening can recall a memory of a person acting fearlessly and being stirred by this alpha behavior. But here's the cool part. Sure, alpha confidence is a magnetic phenomenon, but self-love is an even more powerful one. Anyone who has ever had the great pleasure to be around someone who has the courage and privilege to be themselves can attest to this. Self-love is the truly attractive trait. Through self-love, we can liberate ourselves from our own oppression and live in a state of confidence that also has a large helping of humility as a tasty side dish. If you just can't wait to learn about the actions you can take to help bring about emotional freedom, you can skip right to it via the magic of the podcast. But if you have invested this much time and energy into this project, I implore you to at some point please listen to the episodes that look at cultural influences on gaining emotional freedom, as it is all interrelated to one another. Now, when you go to the dealer to buy a car, they don't charge you for the test drive, yet if you do indeed decide to take the plunge into car ownership, you have to pony up the cash in order to do so. It is in this stage of the podcast that I feel like you have decided to drive it off the lot and into your home for the long haul. So if you could be so kind as to go to theequation.info and donate, it would be an amazing show of support for this project. My goal is to keep this thing sponsor-free, as I don't necessarily believe that other shows that have sponsors really like the products they promote as much as they lead on. I just heard one podcast go on about socks like it was their beloved cat named Socks that's been in the family for the past 13 years and died tragically on a ham bone, as opposed to something you slide over your pesky heel. Hey, I like a good pair of socks as much as the next person. Actually, probably a little more. But you get what I'm saying. I also want to keep it sponsor-free for the sake of charity. I like the idea of a creative project like this being able to survive on the goodwill of others in return for something that I hope has a positive impact on your lives. So if you don't mind, head on over to theequation.info and